My name is Alina Brooks. I'm 34 years old. And the day my keys stopped working was the day I realized I never actually had a family. I only had a role. If you believe family can never betray you, subscribe now, because I used to believe that too. I was always the strong one. That's what my mother called me growing up. Alina doesn't need help. Alina can handle it. Alina's mature for her age. Sounds like praise. Right. It wasn't it was permission for them to give everything to my younger sister, Chloe. Chloe was 3 years younger than me. Soft-spoken, emotional, sensitive. According to my mother, she needed protecting from the world. Apparently, I didn't. When I turned 18, I got a part-time job. When I turned 22, I moved out. By 28, I had bought my own small 2-bedroom house. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every tile, every wall, every mortgage payment. I worked as a nurse. Double shifts, night shifts, holidays. I missed birthdays. I skipped vacations. I built security because no one ever built it for me. 3 years ago, my mother called me crying. She said she had paperwork issues, some mailing problems, something about her apartment lease and tax forms. It was confusing, intentionally confusing, I realize now. She asked if she could temporarily use my address for official mail, just until I sort things out, she said. I didn't hesitate. She was my mother. If you've ever trusted someone just because of a title, subscribe. This story is for you. A few weeks later, she came over with documents, insurance forms. She said something about making sure her mail could be redirected safely. She talked fast. She sounded stressed. I was tired from a 12-hour shift. I signed. I didn't read every page, because I trusted her. That mistake cost me everything, or so I thought. 6 months ago, I came home from work early. It was raining. I remember that clearly. The kind of gray sky that makes everything feel heavier. I walked up to my front door, juggling my bag and my coffee, and slid my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned. I tried again, nothing at first. I thought maybe the lock was jammed. Maybe I was too tired. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The welcome mat was gone. The flower pot I kept near the door, gone. And there was a moving truck parked down the street. My chest tightened. I knocked, and the door opened. Chloe was standing there inside my house. Behind her, I could see my couch, but different cushions. My dining table, but different chairs. Boxes stacked in the hallway. My mother walked into view. Alina, she said softly, we were going to call you. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. Why doesn't my key work? I asked. Chloe looked uncomfortable. My mother looked calm, because she had planned this. It's legally Chloe's now, my mother said. The words didn't register at first. What? She sighed, like I was being difficult. The paperwork you signed added me to the deed. I transferred it to Chloe last month. The world went silent. My ears started ringing. You? What? My sister stepped forward. Mom said you agreed. That you wanted me to have stability, stability, that word. I stared at my mother. You told me those were insurance forms. She avoided my eyes. You never read them, Alina. That was her defense. That I trusted her. If you're feeling your chest tighten reading this, subscribe, because what I did next surprised even me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I looked around at the house I had worked years for, and I realized something. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't emotional, this was strategic. They had waited until I was at work, changed the locks, moved Chloe in, rearranged my furniture. They had erased me. You can't just take my house, I said quietly. It's done legally, my mother replied. You'll land on your feet. You always do. That sentence hurt more than anything else. You'll land on your feet. Because I always had. Because no one ever caught me when I fell. I stood there for another 10 seconds. Then I turned around and walked back to my car. Chloe called after me. Alina, don't make this dramatic, double quotes dramatic. I drove away. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. That night, I stayed in a cheap motel 20 minutes away. I stared at the ceiling and replayed every memory of my childhood. The times Chloe got new clothes while I got hand-me-downs. The way my mother would say, "You understand, Alina," whenever she chose Chloe, the way I convinced myself it was normal. I wasn't angry yet. I was awake, and waking up is painful. By the third day, anger replaced shock. By the fourth day, clarity replaced anger. I called a lawyer. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't answer Chloe's messages. I gathered documents, mortgage payments, bank statements, text messages, screenshots, and then I requested copies of the deed paperwork. That's when the lawyer said something that changed everything. Adding someone to a deed under deception can qualify as fraudulent misrepresentation. Fraud my own mother. I felt sick, but I also felt something else in power. Because they thought I wouldn't fight. They built their entire plan on one belief. Alina won't cause trouble. They were wrong. I'll tell you what happened when they received the sheriff's certified court papers at their front door. Trust me, they did not expect that envelope. If you were in my place, would you have walked away? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Comment below and subscribe, because this story is only getting started. After I met with the lawyer, everything became very quiet. Not emotionally quiet, strategically quiet. I stopped reacting. I stopped arguing. I stopped answering instead. I gathered you bank statements proving every mortgage payment came from my account. Email confirmations from the lender and text messages from my mother saying, "Just sign it quickly. It's boring insurance stuff." Voice recordings. Yes, recordings. Because years ago I learned something about my mother. She rewrote history. So I had started documenting things. That habit saved me. When my lawyer reviewed the deed transfer, he leaned back in his chair and said, "She added herself under false pretenses. That's inducement by deception. A judge won't like that." For the first time since the lock changed, I felt my breathing steady. They hadn't won. They had overplayed their hand. If you've ever been underestimated, subscribe, because that's exactly what they did to me. We filed immediately. Fraudulent, misrepresentation, coercion under misled documentation, financial damages, legal restitution. I didn't warn them. I didn't threaten them. Because when someone betrays you calmly, you respond calmly. 2 weeks later, at 11:14 a.m., my mother called me. I didn't answer. She called again and again. Then Chloe. Then back to my mother. 20-7 missed calls. Finally, a voicemail. "Alina, what is this? Why is there a sheriff here?" I played it twice. Not because I enjoyed it, but because for once, she sounded unsure. The sheriff had served them both certified court papers. Not an argument, not a family discussion. A legal action. And legal action doesn't cry or negotiate, it proceeds. If you think that was harsh, wait and subscribe, because The real confrontation hadn't even started. That evening, Chloe sent a text. "Are you seriously suing Mom? This is insane." Insane. That word again. Gaslighting always sounds confident. I responded with one sentence. "You're living in stolen property." She didn't reply. The court date was set for 3 months later. 3 long months. During that time, I moved into a short-term rental. Small apartment. Minimal furniture. Peaceful. Strangely peaceful. Because once the illusion breaks, clarity replaces chaos. My mother tried reaching out multiple times. She left messages like, "We can fix this privately. You're embarrassing the family. Chloe is fragile. This stress isn't good for her." Notice something. Still about Chloe. Still not about what she did. Still not about me. If you grew up as the strong one, you know exactly how that feels. Subscribe if that role sounds familiar. Asterisk. The day of court arrived faster than I expected. I wore navy blue. Simple. Clean. Controlled. When I walked into the courtroom, Chloe avoided eye contact. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Smaller, less certain. Her confidence only existed when she believed I wouldn't push back. When the judge entered, everything shifted. This wasn't a family argument. This was evidence versus denial. My lawyer presented the documents. Mortgage payments, exclusively mine. Timeline of ownership. Then the texts, projected on a screen. My mother telling Chloe, "Don't worry. She won't question it. She's too busy working anyway. It's better this way." The judge read every word slowly. My mother's lawyer tried the angle of misunderstanding. Claimed I signed voluntarily, and yes, technically I had signed. But intent matters. And deception matters more. Then came the recording. My voice on speaker. "Are these just insurance forms?" Asterisk. My mother's voice. "Yes, it's just mailing. And insurance adjustments. Nothing changes ownership." The courtroom went silent. My mother closed her eyes. That moment. That was the crack. If you think truth doesn't win, subscribe. Because it just did. The judge ruled the transfer invalid due to fraudulent inducement. Ownership reverted back to me immediately. But that wasn't all. Because the judge also ordered them to pay my legal fees, full amount. My sister started crying. My mother didn't. She just looked at me like I had crossed an invisible line. But here's the truth. They crossed it first. I simply enforced it. Outside the courthouse, Chloe finally spoke. "You didn't have to go this far." I looked at her and said something I had never said before. Yes, I did. Because if I didn't, this would not have stopped. They didn't steal because they were desperate. They stole because they believed I would allow it. That belief died that day. 2 weeks later, I returned to my house. The locks were changed again, this time by me. Walking back inside felt surreal. My furniture had been rearranged. Some items were gone. My kitchen felt different, but it was mine. Legally, morally, completely. I stood in the doorway and waited for some overwhelming emotional release. It didn't come. Instead, I felt something steady, like reclaiming oxygen. But the story doesn't end there. Because 3 months later, something unexpected happened. My father, who had stayed neutral through everything, called me. And what he said next revealed this wasn't the first time my mother had manipulated property. Apparently, there were other disputes, other misunderstandings. I was just the only one who refused to stay silent. Asterisk. Things take a turn no one saw coming. Because when my mother ended up in the hospital, guess who was listed as her emergency contact? Not Chloe. Me. If you were in my position, would you have forgiven them? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe, because the hardest decision of my life hadn't happened yet. Asterisk 3 months after the court ruling, my life had finally stabilized. The locks were mine. The deed was mine. The silence from my mother was loud, but peaceful. Chloe moved into a small apartment across town. We hadn't spoken since the courthouse steps. For the first time in years, I wasn't the strong one. I was just me, and then my phone rang at 6:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Is this Alina Brooks? A calm voice asked, double quotes, yes. This is St. Mark's Hospital. Your mother has been admitted. She suffered a stroke. Everything inside me froze. Not because I loved her. Not because I hated her. But because no matter what she had done, she was still my mother. Then the nurse said something that hit harder than the diagnosis. You're listed as her emergency contact. I closed my eyes, of course I was. Even after everything. Even after court. Even after fraud. She still wrote my name down. Not Chloe's. Mine. If you've ever been the responsible one in your family, you know exactly how heavy that feels. Subscribe if you understand that weight. I drove to the hospital in complete silence. Not crying. Not panicking. Just thinking. Why me? Why always me? When I arrived, Chloe was already there. She looked exhausted. Red eyes. Shaking hands. For a moment, we just stared at each other. 12 years of unspoken competition. 3 months of legal warfare. And now this. She asked for you, Chloe whispered. I almost laughed. She can't speak, I said. Chloe looked down. She wrote your name. That did something to me I didn't expect. Anger would have been easier. Indifference would have been simpler. But this was complicated. The doctor explained the stroke wasn't massive, but it wasn't minor either. There would be rehabilitation, decisions to make, authorizations required, insurance forms, treatment approvals, signatures, always signatures. The nurse placed a clipboard in front of me. Since you're listed as primary contact, we'll need your consent for certain procedures. Chloe stepped forward. I'm her daughter too. The nurse nodded gently, but legally. The listed contact holds decision priority. That silence between us felt familiar, just reversed. For the first time in our lives, I was the one with power, and she wasn't. If you were in my place, would you hesitate? Be honest. Comment what you'd do. I picked up the pen. Not because she deserved it. Not because she apologized. Asterisk, but because I refused to become someone who abandons people when they're vulnerable. Even if they once abandoned me. I signed. Later that evening, I walked into my mother's hospital room. She looked smaller than I remembered, machines beeping softly, line taped to her arm. Her eyes opened slowly when she saw me, and something shifted in her expression. Not pride, not authority, fear. Her speech was slurred, but understandable. Ali. Nah. I stepped closer. Yes. She tried to lift her hand. I held it. It felt strange. Familiar, but distant. Her eyes filled with tears. I messed up. That was it. No long speech, no dramatic apology. Just 3 words. I messed up, and suddenly, all the courtroom victories felt irrelevant. Because this wasn't about property anymore. This was about something deeper, control, favouritism. Fear of losing influence. Maybe even jealousy. She had always relied on me being stable, so stable that she assumed I would survive betrayal too. And maybe she believed I'd forgive it quietly. If you're still watching this story unfold, subscribe, because this is where things get real. Over the next 2 weeks, I visited daily, not for long conversations, just quiet presence. Chloe came too, but less consistently. She struggled with seeing our mother vulnerable. For once, she wasn't the protected one. We were both just daughters. One afternoon, Chloe approached me in the hallway. "I didn't know it was illegal," she said softly. "Mom told me you agreed." I believed her, not because I was naive, but because I finally understood something. My mother didn't just manipulate paperwork. She manipulated narratives. She had probably told Chloe I wanted her to have the house. She had probably told herself that too. Distortion becomes truth when repeated enough. But truth always surfaces. It did in court. And now it was surfacing in this hospital corridor. Chloe looked at me. "Are you going to forgive her?" That question hit harder than the lawsuit ever did. Forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about deciding how much power you allow it to keep. "I don't know," I answered honestly, because I didn't. The discharge meeting happened 3 weeks later. Rehabilitation plan, home adjustments, care schedule, and once again, they looked at me for final decisions. Not because I forced it, because she chose it. And that choice complicated everything. Because the woman who betrayed me still trusted me the most. That's not easy to carry. If you were me, would you help her move back home? Would you distance yourself completely? Or would you try rebuilding something broken? Tell me in the comments. Because next is where I make my final decision. And not everyone agrees with it. Subscribe before you go, because the ending might surprise you. 3 weeks after her stroke, the hospital prepared my mother for discharge. Rehabilitation would take months. She couldn't live alone yet. Chloe's apartment was too small and up to flights of stairs. The doctor looked at me during the care meeting. "Does she have a stable home environment available?" The irony almost made me laugh. Stable home, yes, the one she tried to take from me. Everyone in that room knew it. No one said it. Because sometimes the truth hangs in the air without needing words. Chloe looked at me carefully. "She could stay with you? Temporarily. Temporarily. That word carries weight when history exists. If you were in my place, pause for a second and think. Would you even consider it?" Comment honestly. I asked for a day to decide. That night, I walked through my house slowly. My house. Every wall carried history now. Pain, strength, proof. Letting her back inside felt symbolic, like reopening a door I had fought so hard to close. But here's what I realized. Forgiveness does not mean access. Compassion does not mean surrender. And helping someone does not mean trusting them again. If that sentence resonates with you, subscribe, because learning that changed my life. The next morning, I called the hospital. "She can stay," I said, "but under conditions." When my mother arrived at my house in a wheelchair, the silence between us was heavier than before. She looked around carefully at the walls, the furniture, the framed court document I had quietly placed in my office. Yes, I framed it, not out of pettiness, but as a reminder. I showed her the guest room. "You'll stay here," I said calmly. "Chloe will handle your rehab transport. I'll manage medical paperwork. But we need to be clear." She looked nervous. "Clear?" I took a breath. "I will help you recover. But our relationship will not go back to what it was." Her eyes filled again, not dramatic tears. Real ones. I know, she whispered, and for the first time in my life, she sounded small, not controlling, not strategic, just human. The first month was awkward. Quiet dinners, short conversations, occasional apologies that stopped halfway through. But something shifted. Power had equalized. Not because I dominated, because I stopped submitting. There's a difference. Chloe visited. Often, one evening, she stayed behind after helping our mother with exercises. She looked at me seriously. I'm sorry too. For what? I asked. For believing her over you. That one sentence healed something I didn't realize was broken. Because it wasn't just about the house, it was about loyalty. And that finally changed. If you've ever been the sibling who carried everything quietly, subscribe. Because sometimes vindication doesn't look loud. It looks peaceful. 2 months into rehab, my mother sat at the kitchen table and asked to speak privately. She placed a folder in front of me. Inside were notarized documents. She had removed herself from any legal connection to my property. Signed and recorded, no loopholes, no technicalities. I won't ever interfere again, she said softly. That was the closest thing to accountability I was going to get. And strangely, it was enough, not to forget, but to move forward. 6 months later, she moved back to her own apartment, recovered enough to live independently. Our relationship now, it's different, measured, respectful, limited, and that's okay. Because here's what I learned. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. You can forgive someone and still keep boundaries. You can win in court and still choose. Compassion, strength isn't staying silent, but it's also not becoming bitter. It's choosing your response when you finally have power. If you've learned something from my story, subscribe, because more stories like this are coming. So now, I want to ask you something real. Did I do the right thing by suing my own mother? Should I have walked away instead? And when she got sick, would you have let her stay in your house? If you were me, would you have forgiven her? Or would you have cut her off completely? Be honest. Comment below and tell me what you would have done, because sometimes the strongest decision isn't revenge, it's boundaries. And sometimes, the strongest daughter finally stops carrying everyone else. Now tell me, was I right? Or was I wrong?